Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. I am stoked. We got Andrew rejoining us. He's over here. We got Matt rejoining us for the second time. Sean's here as always, and I am stoked for this convo. But now, while I am stoked, y'all should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live, which, of course, Fridays for The Collective and Wednesdays for The Gold Mine. As normal, if you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything at all, by all means, put them up in the comment section and we will engage them throughout the show. We're going to be talking about synergy today, and I'm pumped. So let's get some intros. Andrew, you're up first. Who are you? Where you come from? All that good stuff.
My name is Andrew Siepka. I live out on Oahu, Hawaii. I am a veteran of the Coast Guard's Deployable Specialized Forces and now a full-time strength coach for the Marine Corps, business owner, motivational speaker, coach, and mentor. So jack of all trades, master of none.
Bam, he's hitting it all. Matt, how about yourself?
Hey, I'm Matt Barnett down in Columbus, Texas. I run Bonetti Explosives and the Empresarial Leadership Camp, and I'm just here for the ride.
I love it. And he's got the whole setup this time too, which is awesome, and I'm loving it. Sean, how's life in the mountains?
We're all in for a ride. I feel like I'm already underperforming under ride. The mic, I don't even know what you got going next to your right elbow there, Matt, but it looks like a soundboard, a mixing station.
Roadcaster.
There you go. I'm going to have to do a little bit of upgrading immediately after this podcast. That's what I'm thinking.
Add something into another piece of background onto the table there. You can just start sliding stuff in the background. It would be good. Just want to hit on this real quick. Great ad gear. Morning, gents. Good to see you, Dre. Love having you on. Now, I'm going to get into synergy and I'm going to dive right into the conversation. But how do you define synergy in your own words? And why do you think it's important? Let's put it that way. Andrew, I'm going to hit you first. What do you got?
So right away, when we were thinking about this for synergy, my mind went to balance. But balance is a state of equilibrium where synergy is multiple things coming together to create a much larger impact. So on the process of weightlifting and training, which is what I'm going to be focusing on today, there's multiple ways to train the body, but most of us get stuck in one. And in the military sense, that gives us overuse injuries that show up in our shoulders, knees, and hips. So synergy in a training perspective is outlift the runners, outrun the lifters. If we have a scale of fitness between strength and endurance, all of our tactical athletes need to be somewhere in the middle. So synergizing programming and systems to be able to create that tactical athlete that is strong, explosive, physically resilient, and mentally adapt to whatever they're going to have to face and overcome.
Bam. That's solid definition. Let's shut her down. Let's call it a day. Matt, how about yourself? What are your first thoughts on this?
Oh, I went and looked it up. No, it's so for me, what I thought about was from a business standpoint, when you end up getting in a groove and you build a set of assets and a skill set and you have a knowledge base. And then when you want to branch out into new territory, you find a partner that has done the same thing, but in a different field. And then when you bring those two together, they reinforce each other. And I guess in the world of explosives, you could look at it like a shape charge. And the way a shape charge works is you have this conical bottom on the bottom of the explosive. And as the detonation wave comes through, the waves actually focus a lot like a lens of a magnifying glass to cause the sunlight, to focus, and you're able to burn stuff. And so when it does that, it's able to penetrate through a lot of armor. And without that, you may just dent the steel. But when you add that conical shape to it and the waves work off of one another, you're able to penetrate. And so actually, I just thought of that right now. But what I was thinking about is the people. When I do the leadership camp, I took stock in my life and the things I've done, and I've acquired a lot of land and a lot of machinery, army tank and machine guns and all this stuff and explosives. And I've built a facility out there that's complete off the grid. But my instructors are guys like Navy SEALs. These guys have spent their life becoming what Andrew's talking about, but they don't have the land, they don't have the facility, and I'm not a Navy SEAL. But together, we can put together a facility that's pretty awesome.
I'm loving where this is going already. Sean, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, my first thoughts were when I knew which guests were coming on the show today, and of course, Matt having a storied career in respect to explosives. Funnily enough, I kind of attached Matt's name to black powder, and Matt can correct me, with the history of things, but black powder, I believe, was one of the earliest forms of explosive. It's got some basic ingredients. It's kind of of course, it was the start of the explosives game. And so at the very start, it wasn't very sophisticated. It wasn't nuanced. It was kind of dirty. It wasn't very impactful, even though it had a big impact on the world. And so I kind of thought about explosives to look at synergy as the subject. But I want to take it to the next logical step, at least for Sean, and that is I'm a systems thinker. So synergy is part of systems, whether it's complexity theory or chaos theory or systems theory or emergence theory. All of these ways to look at life all require a certain element of synergy in them. So given that, again, I'm a systems thinker, I do look at the synergistic moments of not just the system as a whole, but all the various parts and how they can synergize or de-synergize in the moment. I'm sure we'll get into some of this during the conversation.
For sure. Interestingly enough, as I was saying earlier, I was playing with ChatGPT, kind of thinking about this, and I came up with the fact that it feels like a oneness between multiple people. So you have many things working towards one goal, and I love where this is going. But I want to touch base on the black powder reference. Matt, what do you think on that?
Well, he's right about everything he said. Black powder was the earliest, what we would consider modern explosive. And it was dirty, and it had a lot of shortcomings that we know of now in the world of explosives. But at the time, it was, it changed the world. It did away with armor eventually. It did away with castles. Before black powder, castles were built as fortresses, and after black powder, they're just kind of a feather in somebody's hat because the walls can be blown down. So I would say that black powder's synergy would be with the will of man. And, everybody thinks of black powder and explosives as being a weapon. I'm actually working with my close friend on a documentary right now called The Spirit of the Bomb. And what we're exploring is why is it that when people talk about explosives, we go right to weaponry, when in fact, you wouldn't have a car if it weren't for dynamite. You wouldn't have oil. You wouldn't have plastics. You wouldn't have a house. There would be no road with aggregate to drive on. So explosives play this massive role in supporting very peaceful modern life. But it's the will of man with those explosives has created a revolution in several industries. And of course, if you want to bend it to evil, if you want to build it to harm of your fellow man, it's very effective at that as well. I always joke that if I were Alfred Nobel, there would be no Nobel Peace Prize, because when Alfred Nobel realized that a false obituary had been printed where it portrayed him as the merchant of death, he felt convicted and bad about that, and he went out and created the Nobel Peace Prize. But I would have just said, why did you assign that to it? All I did was create a tool. This thing will blast rock. It'll make railroad tunnels. You can use it in warfare. It's just a tool. And if you want to say that I'm a merchant of death, that's just not true. And it's not going to affect me. So maybe it's a good thing he invented it. So we've got the Nobel Peace Prize. But that's my thought on explosives, and how together with the will of man, they do become those joined together are extremely powerful and change the world.
And with relative amount of effort, right? As explosive have progressed, it's become less and less effort to change the world around you. And I think it's a great imagery, at least in my head, of the fact that explosives can remove a piece of a mountain pretty easily when you set it up right. But if you don't set it up right, then it's just going to make a really nice black mark on the side of the mountain. Andrew, you got any thoughts on any of this?
So just like I said, speaking from the wheelhouse of training in systems and making sure systems are working together, So in weightlifting, or the style of weightlifting we use, is conjugate or concurrent based. Concurrent based training is raising multiple platforms at once. So there's three ways that we do that as far as systems. You have maximal effort, dynamic effort, and repetitive effort. Maximal effort, we're looking for a strain. So you could think about that like 1 to 3 rep maxes. It's more of a neurological response, right? That's why big, strong guys don't always look like bodybuilders. Then you have the dynamic effort, which is moving submaximal loads at max velocity. So think about something lighter and very aggressive and violent. So the difference even between those two, think about max effort is driving a dune buggy up a hill. Doesn't matter how you get there, but you better get up there, because if you start losing the grind and the momentum, you're going to start flipping backwards. Dynamic effort, you can't dunk the basketball slow. So kind of a way to think of the way the muscle systems work. And then repetitive effort, think about time under tension or using sort of like tempos. So that could be like a push-up test, a burpee test, putting times to certain standards. Now, all those things traditionally in a weightlifting sense are done by themselves. I'm in a block right now where I'm trying to gain strength. I'm in a block where I'm trying to build hypertrophy or muscle size, i.e. repetitive effort, or I'm trying to get more athletic with the dynamic effort. Most times, in most instances, you'll have blocks of like, I'm doing this for 8 weeks, I'm doing this for 6 weeks, I'm doing this for 5 weeks, and then you repeat that. But with our style of training with that concurrent base, because I work with Marines, they don't have set schedules, times, they're all over the place. They could deploy at any moment, especially with the way the world is now. So we use a method that allows us, a rising tide raises all ships, as long as there's principles set in place, kind of like what you were saying with the mountain. If you don't set things up correctly, you're just going to make a black mark. If you do it right, you're gonna get the desired impact you want. Now, the way that we correct that is also with what's called GPP, or general physical preparedness. The best way to think about GPP is if we're building a pyramid, our pyramid can only be as tall as it is wide. So we build a good wide athletic base with our athletes through conditioning and all those different styles of ranges of training. And then we start to get specific and tailored towards what they need. But we can't do that unless the intent is there. So same but different. But like you said, we got a lot of different stuff between the four of us. So with what I speak on today, I'm going to keep it all in the training realm and all in the tactical athlete, because I know a lot of the listeners are guys like us who have experience and backgrounds like us, and all of us have issues with our backs, knees, and shoulders. So that's where I can try to add some value today with that stuff and synergizing the body, because we even have agonist and antagonist muscles that work together to make your body move. If those things are out of whack and not balanced, we're going to end up injured. So synergy in my world creates the ability for longevity and physical resilience.
I'm digging this, man. This I'm going to learn so much on this call. I'm loving this already. Sean, what are you thinking?
So if you think about black powder, it was only as good as the guy or girl who was using it back in the day. And so in the early iterations of any system, any new variable within a system, it's got to be wielded correctly. And that actually takes quite a few mistakes to learn how to do it right. So I'm sure some of those early black powder experiments didn't go well for some of the experimenters. In fact, maybe they had short lives based on that. And so that is part of the experimentation process, man. The history of any new thing introduced into an existing system tends to create chaos. It creates ripples. It creates change. And so as I look at the panel today, we've all been involved in systems, and we all understand that when that new thing comes in, if it's not studied well, if it's not understood for what it can be used for, it can be used incorrectly. And so as Andrew was speaking about training methodologies and intensity, pacing, and all these various things, the same could be said of gunpowder. And so when that first came onto the scene, if you want to move a small rock, then you use a small charge. If you want to move a small rock a far distance, you use a larger charge. And if you want to move a small rock into 1,000 pieces, you use the biggest charge. And now I'm just simplifying things. And so when I consider it from a systems-based perspective, synergy is something that can happen thoughtfully, or it can happen through happenstance or through accident. And so, again, back to the history of black powder, as it was emerging, as it was being understood and wielded as a tool, there were mistakes made and there were discoveries made. And so I believe that it takes a keen eye for someone to observe a new thing as it introduces itself into a existing system so it can be wielded appropriately for the future. Therefore, synergy in and of itself requires someone who pays attention to synergy and pays attention how to de-synergy something. And so you have to understand how to build, and you have to understand how to destroy. You have to understand how to be additive and subtractive in life. And so black powder, again, as the example, may not exist in mankind's history if not for someone who was additive and subtractive at the very earliest stages of its creation. And so we all have a responsibility, I believe, to pay attention to that additive and subtractive elements of our life when we're looking for synergy, not just within our life, but within the lives that are surrounding us.
It kind of reminds me of, when Andrew was talking about fitness a second ago, it's the fact that when you look at the old, like 1930s physical training movies, like those old reels from back in the day of people just doing kind of like air squats and the really basic movements of fitness at the time, those were slowly adapted from people who would just live those styles of lives, right? Like you would do the things that everybody would normally do. You'd watch some dude toss hay a certain way and be like, oh, wow, he's got really big shoulders. Maybe I should train like that, right? And so you're adding something to your life, but you're also, by adding something, you have to remove something else, at least in my mind. And I'm wondering, where you guys think, I'm going to ask it this way in terms of like, if you're already doing something, you're already working a particular demanding career, you're already in a particular field that takes up a lot of your time, but you want to add something into it. How do you work that bandwidth? How do you create that synergy between the two things that are working almost, if you know what I'm talking about? Matt, I'm going to hit you first. What do you think?
Well, thank you. Yeah, my mind was all over the place when Sean was talking. What I do is I reach out to other people. That's what I do. I find somebody that knows more about this new thing than I do. And I will go to them and present an idea and say, hey, I think I have something here that's working well. And I noticed that this amplifies it, but I'm not really an expert about it. And in my field, you really don't have a lot of room for screwing up. So I do a ton of research before I ever get to the laboratory to do the actual mixing. And then the mixing is done in small amounts. And so, at least speaking from my experience, it's done incrementally and by putting a lot of feelers out to experts in the field. Like there is no shame at all in it. And everybody in the explosive industry will tell you this. There's nobody that knows it all. And don't ever be ashamed about asking something that you think is, you think, oh, this is stupid. I shouldn't ask it. It's probably elementary. Ask it. Nobody that's a professional is going to beat you up for that. And most people will help you because we all learn off of one another. So in a nutshell, how do I approach it? Incrementally and reaching out to other experts in the industry.
I love that. It's just kind of stepping off the gas a little bit and just seeking that more information. Andrew, what do you think on this one?
So for me, just looking at the population that I train, right? So Marines are known to be very physically and mentally tough, but the thing about the Marine Corps is they're mentally tough. And majority of times they're mentally tough to the point that they won't listen to their bodies. So they break because the only tool they know how to use is intensity. So I try to use this analogy with them of if I gave you a board and a hammer and a bunch of nails, you'd have no problem putting those nails in that board. But once I gave you a screw, because you're so mentally tough and stubborn at this point, you're going to hammer the screw into the board, but then you're going to split the board, break it in half, and lose all your progress. And that's kind of like the thing I use as like a light switch to make them start thinking about how we change when we're in the weight room. We're chasing a stress to create an adaptation. Anything more than that is going to put us in a deficit. Anything less than that is not going to give us the strain and struggle we need to create the adaptation. So it's all about the intention behind what we're doing, because the body is a machine and I'm training it as a machine. And there's not a lot of room for error when you start loading the spine, loading the hips, and then start looking at some of these things that these communities do. So our principles are on adaptation, modifications, and then also being able to build a strong knowledge base. So something my mentor put in me when I first started this was, if you're going to lift, you should be reading twice as much as you train. So I train 4 solid hours a week and I read 8 hours a week. And that's not to account for my 40-hour work week with the Marine Corps and my 30-hour side hustle. So I still got to make up the time for the 8 hours of reading. But I do that in a way too, where it's like it builds ownership of the athlete over their body, because none of this stuff came from my mind. I didn't make any of this up. It's all scientific backed literature that if you know where to look and you know where to research and you have the patience to understand and learn a craft, just like explosives, just like marksmanship, just like CQB, just like anything else, if you take the time to learn the craft and perfect the craft, you'll always be able to get better, because you always learn how to modify, because life is not linear, it's dynamic. So the more that we can work and flow in a dynamic environment, the easier it is to stay on track and look at things as speed bumps that we can modify to instead of roadblocks.
Yeah, this is reminds me of trying to hit a speed bump at speed with no shocks. It's gonna hit you hard, right? Versus if you slow down a little bit and allow yourself to roll over it. I think that's beautiful. Sean, you got thoughts?
Quite a few, actually. Back to what Matt was speaking about when, and I think maybe you framed the question up a little bit different, Chance, to Matt than what you wrote down there. So maybe Matt will want to, have a re-go at that, because he was speaking about how he would reach out to other professionals or friends or peers that he trusts and in respect to these kind of things. And so, and I agree, that's the right approach. And quite frankly, I want to add an exclamation mark to what Matt said. Not only should you feel good as a professional reaching out to other professionals to ensure that you're on point, you should do it even if you know the answer, if for no other reason than to demonstrate to your peers and people who look up to you, perhaps, that you're open-minded and you're humble enough to go and seek an answer, even if you've got the answer in your back pocket. There's nothing wrong with confirming that your answer that is solid gold is actual solid gold. Everyone needs to see that the people at the tip of the spear still check in with the entire spear. So that's just a public service announcement that I think we're all supposed to do that. So the synergy piece, to add on to what Matt was speaking about, you can ask your peers, but long before we had peers, long before we even knew there were other human tribes, it was just a tiny little clan on some little African savanna trying to survive. And they didn't have a bunch of other dudes to check in on and ask for answers. They had something as elementary as biomimicry. And we've all done it. We've all watched the praying mantis on the twig. It's doing its thing. And you're checking it out and you're thinking, what's up with that little guy? Is he going to be successful scrapping with that other praying mantis? And you check it out, man. You watch the fight. You watch the ants scrap. You watch the ants drag the leaf. That's what we used to do as humans a long time ago before we had the interwebs. And so we did biomimicry. We mimicked nature around us. A lot can be learned from watching an ant drag a leaf. Sometimes more than watching a man drag a tree, or whatever the case is. I find that nature, through its... I find nature to be more efficient sometimes than mankind, simply because we don't have a clear signal. We've got too much white noise going on in the moment. So an anthill moving a leaf will be far more effective will synergistically work together better than sometimes an entire city trying to move a leaf out of the middle of the city. And so I think synergy comes down to I'm speaking now generally on what Matt was relaying earlier. I think synergy comes down to many aspects that hopefully we'll get into during the podcast. But it's not as simple as if this, then that. Synergy is quite complex if you want to have effective synergies. Now, to your question, Chance, synergy between a demanding career and personal passions. I don't know. The only way I can explain it is, and this is sheer coincidence because I didn't know the subject the other day, and that is you'll have seen me vacuuming in my living room on Instagram. I just threw up a little video. I was vacuuming. We had a bunch of ladies come over last night for the Roslyn Book Club of all things. And so I had to go on this mad cleaning spree. I was freaking washing the outside windows. It was nuts, man. And so while I was doing all of that, there's two programs that I was running in my little melon. The first program was how you do one thing is how you do everything. And so when I'm vacuuming the carpet, this is for the ultra nerds, but you'll see me doing footwork. You'll see me doing fighting footwork. You'll see me doing timing. You'll see me doing spacing. You'll see me fighting as I'm vacuuming. You'll also see me using situational awareness. You'll also see me dotting. It's like CQB, but with a vacuum. It's like scaling Everest, but with a vacuum. It's like cooking a great meal, but with a vacuum. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And I've tried to carry that into my entire life. So if I'm good with X, I want to make sure that that carries through to Y and Z or Z. And so your synergy from your career, as I see it, there should be no separation from career to passions to as you're brushing your teeth at the end of the night to go to bed. How you do one thing is how you do everything. The second thing that I'd like to say when you're looking at synergy between a demanding career and your personal passions is understand the game of life. So as I was vacuuming and as I was cleaning windows, it was all just a big game to me. And I'm not talking like ha-ha, knee-slapping fun game, because it wasn't fun. It sucked. But I turned it into a game. Who loves vacuuming? So I had to turn it into a game. And the game is up to Sean. So I can make it a super freaking boring game, or I can make it like, super cool. And that is for my mind to create. And there's no reason that anybody in the entire world right now can't look at a problem in front of them and turn it into a fun game. I think most of us turn it into a crap game, a boring game. I don't want to do this game. This is lame game. I'm guilty of it for sure. But it's easy to flip that script and turn it into, I'm going to freaking crush this vacuuming. I'm going to be the best vacuumer in the world today. I love playing those little games with myself. So for me, the synergy between a demanding career, which let's say requires a 10 out of 10, I give 10 out of 10 to the vacuum. So food for thought.
I love this playing games with vacuum, because when I vacuum, I try to make my lines clean. Like I make little, and I make them all specific, and I do it on purpose because that's how I know I did a good job, is that if everything is exactly the way I want it to turn out, I know that I put the effort into the moment to actually make it that way. Same thing when I'm mowing the grass, because I like putting patterns in the grass as well. So, Matt, you got any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah. When Andrew was talking about the muscles, the ones that go, what did you say? Protag. You've got ones that go one way and the ones go the other way.
Agonist and protagonist.
Yeah, those. So that got
antagonist, agonist. I'm sorry.
Antagonist and agonist.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that got me to thinking some stuff I'm dealing with right now, actually. And this goes with Sean. I'm turning things into games. Well, not so much games, but actual. It's really growth is what it is. You have the positive and the negative side of this. So you get with somebody that's very positive and goal oriented, and together you do something really well, right? But let's say that you had someone tearing you down, picking on you, um, it just cause an overall discomfort in your life, and you don't really know why. But if you feed into that, you also have a synergy, but it's going in a negative direction because you start giving them negative feedback. You call them a name, and it's just like little children. I mean, I got 4 kids. I see this all the time. You know, it's like I tell one of them, just stop. Don't even mention her name, and it'll just go away. And so I'm experiencing this in my life where, you know, I've got people surround me that have their own issues, and you realize that when they're telling you all this stuff, they want to hear. They don't want to hear an answer. They want to hear you hear them have a problem. But I'm a goal oriented guy. So, you know, I'm sitting there thinking of solutions, but I got to realize, stop, shut up, listen. And then also, you have a friendship and you have something good happen in your life, you want to share it, you know? Well, you might share that because they're thinking of their self and the trouble they're going through. They take that as a boast. And they're like, oh, you know, you can tell me how great things are going for you. And I'm like, that's not my intent. I thought we were friends and we share bad and we share good. Um, and so a lot of times to be synergistic in a positive direction, you just got to shut up. And it really, shutting up with your mouth is the product of shutting up in your heart and shutting up in your emotional side. And you understand this is literally like he said about the Marines. Okay, you hammer a nail through a board, but if you're going to use a screw, you need to just stop and use the screw correctly, or it won't work. It has nothing to do with how good looking you are, how smart you are. It's like, if you don't do it this way, it won't work. You want it to work or not? That's it. And so a lot of times with relationships, you need to control yourself and understand this. We have an objective goal to get to, and this person is, you know, falling off the track or whatever. They're having an emotional moment. You don't go with that. You don't feed into it. You don't pick on them. You stand there, maybe listen to them, say you understand, and move on. And then when you have people attacking you, what I've found is that is a wonderful opportunity to listen to yourself, because the first stuff you say is, that asshole, I'm going to go get them this way, or I'm going to do something to them. And it's okay, I think, to let that run in your mind as long as you're observing it and it's not in the driver's seat. And then once you observe that, you say, but how is it going to serve my goals? And it's not. It's gonna put you in the ditch, playing in the mud with a doofus, and you're not gonna get where you need to go. Okay, we have a saying amongst my friends and I: you can be right, you can be rich. So you're right. You're right. I did that wrong. I'm sorry. We're moving on, you know? And that's difficult. And I'm learning that, but I love it. Somebody was asking me the other day about the stresses I'm under. I said, actually, I've come to the point now where I used to listen to all this stoic stuff while I'm working out in the morning. Like, every day you get an opportunity to apply that. And when those things happen, you should rejoice and be like, yeah, this is opportunity to watch me be a little jealous peckerhead, or this is opportunity to watch me want to lash back out, and ask myself why, let it go. And you'll have a more positive synergy.
I love that. I actually got a little mental image of taking that anger or that jealousy or that little voice of just like, oh, what is this or that guy or blah, and putting them on like a little you know, those old racetracks, those electric racetracks that had the cars, you just pull the trigger and just like let them spin. Cool. Let them spin.
Yeah.
But you're still in charge of it, right? You're the one controlling it. I think it's just a great image. Andrew, I saw you nodding your head a whole bunch. What are you thinking?
I love it, because I think we're gonna go all over with this today, because you sparked something on relationships for me with that. And coaching is about relationships. At the end of the day, I can have all this information in my head, but if my Marines don't know that I care about them, they're not going to necessarily listen to me. Once they know I care and I'm willing to bleed for them, they're willing to bleed for me too. So one of the ways as a coach I've kind of had to navigate or synergize my coaching philosophy is sympathy versus empathy, right? Most times we think sympathy and empathy are the same thing. We need both of them, but if we sympathize too much, we give everyone an excuse and an opportunity to find a way out. If we empathize, it's like, hey, brother, or hey, sister, I know where you're at. I know what's going on. I hear what you're saying, but what are we doing about it? Compared to, oh my God, I'm so sorry that you're dealing with that. And now, especially when it comes to injuries, because when we're dealing with injuries, just like when people are having a bad day, They don't want me to fix their injury. They want me to tell them how awesome they are and how tough they are because they pushed so hard that they broke. I'm not a very sympathetic person in those terms. I'm like, congratulations, you're an idiot. But that's not going to help me get to where I want to be. So I get to practice and empathize with them, where it's like, let's just use an example of like deadlifting, because everyone, especially young Marines, they want to deadlift. You can lift the most weight, and everyone ends up looking like a scared cat on Halloween with this big rounded back, and then they end up hurt. And now it's deadlifting's bad for your back. Deadlifting is stupid. That's how I got hurt, XYZ. I could approach that a certain way as a 20 some odd year strength coach, 25 years in the weight room, and just like smash them. Or it could be like, well, did you ever think about wedging yourself into the bar, pushing off of the floor, and like maintaining proper position and alignment by keeping your chest in the position of attention? And it's like, wait, what? And it's like, okay, let's break this thing down a little bit, because I know you're intense and I know you're willing to go, but now let's walk it back a little bit and let's figure this thing out, because your injuries can be prevented through smart mechanics and principles. Because at the end of the day, we should be able to bring these principles back to the systems, right? And whether it's training systems, energy systems within the body, or the psychological stuff we have to deal with while navigating all of this, we're all touching on reframing how we're approaching issues. And it's all about being able to reframe those processes to be able to kind of navigate it, because synergy, very similar to like a scale, right? A scale, we don't want balance with this scale. Synergy, we're going to kind of get things flowing and moving together in unison. So it's always going to be dynamic. So if I have someone coming up and complaining about the same issues, but they still want to feel special, I got to make them feel special and heard, but I can't let them feel like they're such a special unicorn that we have no issue or use for them, because we always have to be finding the thing you can do, because at the end of the day, we need to keep them in the fight, whether that's physically or mentally. And we all know we will take ourselves out of the fight the second we face resistance that we don't know how to deal with.
It's a beautiful point. I was on a podcast earlier this week, and they asked me, how do you maintain balance? And I was like, balance isn't, to your point, Andrew, it's not about being static. You know, when I was thinking about a bongo board, you know what I'm talking about, where you have the round ball underneath and you got to sway back and forth. And that's what makes it the exercise. That's what makes it fun. That's what makes it enjoyable, is the fact that you're teeter-tottering, right? You're not just standing on a flat board and balancing perfectly. I think that's it's a beautiful point. Sean, what are you thinking?
So as I was listening to the fellas, I was thinking about network effects, and mostly coming out of Andrew's conversation, network effects. So he's a coach. He's coaching some people, and he's going to have no effect on the future if he's crappy at his job. He's going to significantly impact the future if he's really good at his job. And I'm not talking about impacting the person immediately in front of him who needs some help with their deadlift. I mean, to me, that's not even on the radar. It's so small scale. As I look at a problem in front of me, like the deadlifter who's doing it wrong, I'm looking at that person as a proxy to create system-wide change. And so they're gonna get the correct balance of sympathy and empathy from me in the moment that is required in order to move the needle for the entire network. And so that requires a sort of more nuanced or complex delivery of information to that individual, where you're, of course, going to talk about the technical improvements that they need to make at some point in the conversation. That's going to be touched on. But I'm probably going to enter into the conversation with, hey, you got a moment? Come grab a seat with me. So what's the deal with trying to lift 1 million pounds? Why are you doing that? Why have you set such a ridiculous goal for yourself where it's obvious that your structure is falling apart? You're shortcutting the process by trying to be all that you can be, that you're not there yet. And I'm going to challenge them psychologically more than I'm going to challenge them physiologically. Because at the end of the conversation, what I want them going away with is this thought, not the coach just fixed my structure up. The coach just made me think about life. And then they're into the locker room, and maybe they've got the towel over their head and they're thinking, what the heck, man? What philosophical bomb just hit me in the gym? Well, as the towel's hanging over their head. Maybe someone will notice that and say, hey, what's up? I don't know. Coach just hit me with the life-challenging puzzle of, why am I overlifting? Why am I dotting? Why am I flaring out? Why am I underperforming? Why am I being such a goof in the gym? Why am I trying to impress everyone in the gym? Why am I all of the things that aren't related to the actual lift? That's what I'm going to get into someone's head on, because I know that by doing that, it's going to have network effect. It's going to impact everyone in the gym eventually, because everyone talks. Everyone, especially if you're a good coach, everyone says, do you know what coach hit me with yesterday? And then it's the philosophical, megaton drop of the day from yesterday. And so I do believe that synergy is as big as you think about it. So the synergy of the moment of sorting out that one individual, yeah, that's really important. But as a systems-based observation, I think that these kind of conversations are multifaceted or multi-layered with the individual, and you're trying to plant seeds into the network's mind. That's my thought.
Now, so what I'm hearing from all you guys, the importance of the network, the relationships, and how it applies, and I can see how some people might think of synergy as just teamwork or cooperating with somebody, but it's, in my mind, it's not at all. But I want to get your guys' thoughts on what separates the two. Why is synergy different from teamwork or cooperation? Matt, coming to you first. What do you think?
Well, I think it goes back to art. There's so much in life that's art form. And I can get somebody to do teamwork with me to move a bunch of logs from one end of my farm to the other. But if I have synergy, that person is going to say, these logs will look really good over here. And I'd be like, yeah. And you know what? We could stack them this way and build that. And not only do we move the logs from one end of the farm, but we build something amazing on the other side. So teamwork is not necessarily synergy. Synergy has more of the, in my mind, the intangible, the spirit built into it. And so you have two professionals. If we're talking about two professionals joining forces, it's two people who have dedicated a significant amount of time, effort in their life to become professionals in different practices. Different studies, and then combine that together. You're going to get magic. You're going to get something that anyone by themselves couldn't do, but together is amazing. So it goes far beyond just cooperation.
Let's build on that, Andrew. What are you thinking?
I would say, just to paint a picture here, right? I'm not a big football, basketball guy, but they're general sports that most people know and their teams. So I'm going to frame it that way. You have a lot of professional teams, but at the end of the season, there's one championship team. And usually that championship team is synergized. So in a way, I look at teamwork and synergy as teamwork is one thing, but synergy is like a version 2.0 of that. Like almost when you get to synergy, a teamwork is almost like a non-negotiable, but it's like everyone, like was already kind of discussed here, you have these things that you've dedicated your life to, a craft, a thing. And when you come back with that, with someone who's also like-minded or yoked on that same level, you now allow for a level of creativity and art to happen. And a real-time example of that is this conversation here. I'm a strength coach. Matt works with explosives. You guys got a laundry list of things you do. We're all over the place, but look at that. In 40 minutes, we found a way to take every single background we have and every single thing we're doing it and tie it into a multifaceted conversation, not through teamwork, through synergy, because all this is free flowing.
Free flowing to a degree. I do have a little bit of a plan here, but
yeah. Well, at least on my end, brother. On my end.
I 100% hear you. Sean, what are you thinking on this?
Yeah. So I do like the idea that synergy is a more evolved sense of teamwork. And, Matt kind of started us off with that, and we're kind of rounded out now to this idea of maybe team generation 2.0. And I kind of like that idea of something more than just a team. And I've felt it. We've all felt it. We all know when we're in a good mix. We all know when we're with the right people. And if there's eight of you standing there, it feels like 27, maybe 38, maybe 104, because it just feels right. And it brings an amount of firepower that exists outside of the room that you're all standing in. It just feels like more. It feels like better. Feels like bigger, faster, stronger. And so these kind of things, I believe, can be quantified. I think they can be turned into algorithms. I think they can be studied through the scientific lens and kind of explained as, oh, well, it's obvious that there was synergy there because of the following variables. I think that can be done, but that doesn't demonstrate the feel, the vibe, the synchronicity of the moment, because that's what synergy is to me. The synchronous understanding of that moreness, that betterness than just the whole. It's the whole times two almost. And so that feeling is an important aspect of synergy, because if you've never identified a synergistic team or a synergistic effort, then you don't know what the feeling is. And so you have to try to feel these things. You have to seek these things and then be in the moment of it and take it for what it is and patternize it, categorize it, give it a name called, oh, this is what synergy feels like. Because once you taste it, you want more of it. And so if the last time you ever were on a team was in high school, and it probably didn't have much synergy, if I'm being honest, you seek being around a maybe not successful team, but a team that from arm's distance looks like it's really positive, looks like they work well together, looks like they're having fun, looks like you might want to join in, and then just like walk a little closer and see if you can feel anything. Because synergy doesn't require all of the basketballs to go in 3-pointers, bang, 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 one after the other. Maybe nobody's got a basketball in their hand. Maybe they're all just standing by the water cooler. Go stand by the water cooler. You'll feel the synergy. You can feel synergy on and off the field. You've just got to find the right people, stand near them, and start looking for the pattern of what you're going to start seeking in the future.
The vibe check, right? That you got to, if the vibe feels right, it's a beautiful feeling to have. And I think at least it stems from, in my mind, an ability to communicate at a much more subtle level than just direction, right? I think that's, at least in my mind, what distinguishes teamwork from synergy is the fact that if I have to tell you to do something, we're not synergizing. If we are just looking around and things are happening and there's a level of communication there that is not, it's not surface level. It is deep 3-4 levels where, Sean, you had mentioned a while ago, or a number of times throughout the shows, that when you were on the hill with the team, you were shooting at a level that you could just think hole, and holes would appear in your target. And I'm sure that the people in your stack, in your team, were feeling in a similar way. You'd be able to flow through room. CQB is a great demonstration of this. When it's done well, nobody's speaking. Nobody, like, they're communicating, obviously, but the movements aren't responses to spoken orders. They're just flowed from movement to movement. And I'm wondering, what do you think enables that level of communication, that subtle level of communication? Trust, experience, anything else? Is there something extra sensory to it? What do you guys think? Andrew, I'm gonna come at you first. What do you think?
So I run a team out here. So I'm the main coach, and then I have 3 coaches underneath me. I have 1 other male and 2 females. We all have different backgrounds. The male's a little bit younger. He comes from more of like a high school sports background and college background. I have the tactical background, and then my two other coaches are married to Marines. One's been in the community for over 20 years, but they all have some baseline level of education and athletics themselves. The team is synergized because when we first met, the expectations were set for not for everyone to do what I'm doing, but to play their positions, know what their position is, and then allow flexibility within the framework I set for them. And the big things I used for that was what I learned in the teams, big boy rules, right? If I'm going to be flexible with you, you better make sure you're doing what you're supposed to do. So these are the non-negotiables. Find the work in the room. There's always something to do. And then hunt and kill your own food. So as far as there's 4 of us, there's 9,000 Marines on this base. I can't do all the outreach. I can't do all of these things. And the outreach I'm doing now is more on the side of like working with the commands and the senior enlisted to get things set up. But that doesn't mean my coaches can't be out there hunting, being on the field, talking with Marines, engaging with Marines, letting them know what the value is. So I encourage them to do those things within their frameworks. But because of that, too, that also allows us the opportunity to come to the table and sit and have constructive professional development with them. So I am in charge, but I've never once thrown that out. I use it more of like a team captain. If this is a team and I'm the captain of the team, we all have the same mission sight and mission focus. So what do we need to do to get there? So I have to be hyper aware of watching my coaches. Do my coaches look burnt out? Has there been a lot going on? Is there a little bit of time where maybe I can take everyone to lunch and we can sit down in a different environment, have lunch and have some chalk talk, see what's going on and all of these other things? Because now my perspective is in order for my coaches to be able to coach, I need to coach my coaches, right? So my role and position has changed. And as my role and position and changes in this dynamic environment, my coaches' roles change as well. But because there's a level of trust, there's a level of buy-in, and they know that when they bring things to the table, I will listen and provide feedback and guided self-discovery with them. Because at the end of the day, I don't want them to be me. I want them to be better than me. But what I do want them to do is plant and water seeds wherever they are. So setting hard lines in the beginning and then continuing to hold that standard, because that doesn't mean all my coaches are always like, yeah, like, let's go out there and do it. Like, we're people. We kick and scream and we're temperamental and we're selfish at times. So there comes a lot of correction. And you guys know this, whether it's on the business side or working in a high functioning team, when there's personalities and pride, that's the hardest thing to coach. So figuring out how to navigate those things with my coaches, with letting them know you're a professional, you're here for a reason. And I know that, but we still have things we have to do. Just allows you, like, it all comes back to really having to be hyper aware of your situations and environments and really having good communication skills and being able to read a room. If I can't do that with my coaches, I'm not going to be able to get them to do what I need them to do. If they're not able to do what I need them to do at the level we need them to do it at, we don't create buy-in. We don't have trust in the community. And if there's no trust, none of this stuff matters. Because in my job, I am reframing a culture, like you guys said. I am in an intense culture where intensity and physicality are a gift. And here I am with my staff saying, hey, too much pain, no brain, you're going to get injured, right? No pain, no gain, but too much pain, no brain. Like, I need you guys to last. But it's like, what's this guy talking about? So it's a constant ebb and flow of this synergistic thing, because we're like salmon swimming upstream right now. We're constantly fighting uphill, but we have something of value. So when it's planted and watered, like Sean said, it sprouts and grows. But now I need my coaches to be able to prune what's growing as well. Because if it grows wild, or if that seed is not planted deep enough, it will die because it can't plant its roots, or it'll be exposed to too many elements and it'll wither and die. And that takes us having a keen eye of what we're dealing with and who we're dealing with. So that's kind of how I look at it and how I try to use it in this sense, because I got all of this on a small team and I run and operate a small team here, and we are very outnumbered, but I push my guys at a high intensity because that's what was done to me. And it's funny because they can do it and we work hard, man, but everyone is in deep and meaningful work. And that's what matters to me as a leader, is everyone wants to be here. Kind of like what Sean was saying. I don't have coaches who come and punch the clock, because I'm not that type of leader. I don't set that standard and I don't deal with that well. So it's like, we're going to be the best. We're going to punch above our weight class and we're going to be the best. And this is how we're going to do it. But I'm also very aware that I can't do things to them that I'm not willing to do or haven't done myself. as well. So it ties back into that servant leadership. I'm not out here doing this. I'm in the trenches with my guys every day because that's where I like to be, because that's where the most work gets done.
There's a really interesting thing that clicked in my head is the fact there's this and there's this. And it's two very, it's a small difference, but it's a very distinct difference. I really love that. Matt, what are you thinking?
Well, I was thinking of, it's kind of, he summed it up. I mean, that's it. But I was thinking about explosives, and when you want to blow up something that's pulpy like wood, tree, you know, you take two charges and you initiate them at exactly the same time, opposing each other, and what you get is a third effect in the center of that target where the two waves bounce off of each other, and in effect, it's a third explosive that you didn't have to plant. It blows that tree up or timber, whatever. And so there's almost this third element that's an entity of itself. And then I thought about working on the farm and looking at farming equipment and how, you know, a hay baler is an interesting thing. It takes the hay off. It's got a little belt that pulls it up in there, little teeth. Everything is timed perfectly. It compacts the hay, and then it puts a string around it, ties it up, and then poops out a bale of hay. And the goal of making the hay bale is that third entity, and every part in that machine has to do its part. And it has to do its part in a way that works with the others. And of course, that's built by design because a human being created that thing. And so when I think about synergy with people, I think that if we can emulate a machine, the more we can emulate a machine, the better, because the thing that gets in the way is the self. And that's fine and all when I'm painting a picture by myself, looking at the mountains and crying about that house I want to own. That's fine. But if I'm having synergy with a team and there's an objective, I myself need to do my duty, which is clear my mind and become emotionless with the ego and focus. And so when someone gives me criticism, immediately take it as a positive thing. Hey, this is a correction that needs to be made. It's an adjustment on the belt to make that hay bale come out better, right? And if everyone on the team, and I don't know if this has ever happened, but if everybody could completely just evaporate the ego and say, we have a goal to do. And when somebody has, well, nobody would have a breakdown, but if somebody did, everybody's just quiet, observes, and then moves on. But let's say that no one did that. I think that the magical entity that appears is the goal orientation. So the subtle communication, trust, maybe shared experience, for sure. But I think if it's, I mean, you could talk about this forever, but to sum it up, it's having a goal, a clear, concise goal. Everybody is on board for accomplishing that goal. And we've all put our personal self aside to accomplish the goal, to the point of we're not offended by anything. Let's just get the goal done.
Yeah, completely mission oriented. I love that. Sean, what are you thinking?
Well, Matt said, if only there was a machine. Well, there is. It's called the Army, at least the machine that I stepped into. And I stepped in as maybe a stalk of hay, and that was going to be created into that hay bundle. And so I stepped into the machine, and on day one, I didn't know anything. And so, again, to Matt's point, how well you listen, how well you interoperate in a system, how mission oriented you are, how rapid you are to quickly calibrate to the proper trajectory of what the machine wants. These are all indicators. These will all demonstrate outcomes as to how fast you get to the spot that you belong within the machine. And so, using myself as the example, I've already stated when I showed up, I knew nothing. And then I was a warrant officer in a Tier 1 Special Operations unit. And you just don't like fall off the back of the hay bale machine. You don't bumble off the turnip truck and turn into that. That is a process that you and the machine have to synergistically go through in order to become that thing. And so I believe that nearly anyone can achieve great heights within that military machine, within any system-based machine, if you understand the machine you're in if you understand the direction the machine is going, if you align with the direction that the machine is going. So now, Chance, specifically your question on the subtle communication, the ability to not have to talk, this art of a refined understanding, or we'll call it maybe even a telepathic ability to operate, which I feel is something that exists at the highest levels. At one point, I knew none of that stuff, but I believe it can occur for anyone if you create the proper conditions. And I'm going to list off some of the conditions that I think are required in order to gain that kind of telepathic ability. First things first, you've got to do enough iterations. In other words, you've got to do the reps to a point where they then become autonomous. Because you can't go through the CQB doing all of the things while thinking about all of the things. What you have to do is go into the CQB and let all of those things do it themselves, autonomously offloaded. The skills, the reps are so ingrained that they just unfold. Allowing your higher order of thinking or your higher order of processing, your higher order of communication, I'll call it, to do its thing. Because if you've been in those moments, the words that aren't swapped are swapped with a quick eye glance, just a quick, that's it. 12 paragraphs were explained in that one flash of an eye. If you just do one of those, that's a half a book. If you do that, that's an entire encyclopedia at the high levels. Most communication isn't on a throat mic. It's just on a quick glance. It's just on a aura. It's just your energy. It's how you stand in the moment. The subtle art of communication at the high levels speaks volumes. But in order to speak volumes in the flash of an eye, you've got to have done the reps. Further to the reps, I think there's another variable that has to be part of that equation, and that is adversity, consequence, I'll call it. So using Matt as an example, Matt wouldn't be on the planet right now if he hadn't have taken explosives seriously. So the consequences of being a village idiot or falling off the back of the turnip truck as an explosive expert is a short life cycle. So you have to be aware of the consequences of the game that you're playing in the moment. Take them seriously enough that you're there the following day. And through that process of iteration and consequence, what it teaches a person to do is there's no sauntering to the objective most of the time. Usually it's time constrained and consequence based. So I don't, in my mind, see Matt with a hobo stick over his shoulder with a bag full of explosives kind of sauntering out to the objective to do the job. What I see him doing is moving quickly, effectively, and efficiently, squared away, doing a job that he's done a bajillion times, not sweating the details because he knows all the details. And he'll communicate an encyclopedia with a quick glance to his partner, who hopefully has also done a whole pile of iterations and understands consequence, understands time, and will be able to see that quick glance and interpret the entire encyclopedia's worth that he just got blasted. And that's how communication works. The subtle art of interacting at the highest of high levels requires a lot of iterations and needs a consequence-based environment to reinforce all of those iterations. Otherwise, you're just sauntering with your hobo stick with all the time in the world.
I do kind of want to see Matt now with a hobo stick with a bag full of explosives. I do want to see it.
I did grow up on a farm, you know. I might have dynamite fished now and then.
There you go. Well, then let's go around again, because I think this is a great piece to kind of dive into. Matt, you got any thoughts on what Sean just hit up?
I was listening to him, man. I was into that. Um, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but it really is important to find people that are professional to align yourself with, that at least even if everybody's not on the same page, they understand that they need to get on the same page. And that may be you calling them out, or that may be them calling you out. And you have to be humble enough to get in line and become part of the machine. Like Sean said, he went in the military as that straw, and he didn't come out as the bale right away. It took time and finding out, hey, where do I fit in this and become the best part to achieve the goal? I certainly had to figure that out. I just liked blowing things up when I was little, and everybody told me you'll never make a living. You're going to be in jail, and you're going to be poor. And neither of those have happened. In fact, the federal government's one of my larger buyers, and I'm not poor. But I got there from doing what you say, repetition. In fact, I have a friend visiting right now, and I took him out and showed him a little bit of basic demo. And I said, now this is a very small shot. I said, but this process is the same forever. And I have a class this weekend. Actually, at 5:00, I've got students starting to show up, and I hire a Navy EOD guy that's just got out of the military, and he comes in. He is my assistant instructor. And I grew up with explosives. Know I'm on a very intimate level from the manufacturing. I think I said before, my goal is to be thrown naked on an island somewhere, and then in coconut shells, cook up black powder and make a rocket to be rescued. Be a good reality TV show. So I grew up with that, really a nerd. I mean, a real nerd, and doing the reps with explosives and learning them intimately and seeing what they can do. And this guy learned explosives under pressure, somebody screaming at him and hollering, and he was a diver. And so that adds another element to it. And so he as well understands the consequences of not hitting the mark with that. And you're 100% right, Sean. When he and I work together, I can just look at him and we're communicating. We'll have a student that's saying something, and we don't want to, like Andrew, we don't want to call him out in front of everybody and say, man, what are you smoking? But I'll look at him, and we both know, okay, we're not going to let this guy do this because it's not safe. and we'll talk about it later, but we don't have to talk about it right then because we're on the same page. So I hope that adds something to it.
Absolutely. I saw a comedian actually at one point who was making a joke about this, but he was like, when I was in school, my teacher told me, what do you think, you're going to have a job at some point where you just sit around making jokes? Like, here I am. I was like, that's fantastic. That's such a great point. Andrew, you got any points on this?
I love the fact that no matter what we're talking about in what world, it comes down to reps and consequences, right? To get good and proficient at anything, you need to get your reps in. But even to go a step further with that, those reps only matter if their quality and the intention is correct. So the way I touch a barbell that has no weight on it is the same exact way I touch a barbell when it's maximally loaded. And I teach that same process because there's consequences to weightlifting. If you put 500 pounds on your back to squat it and you don't know what you're doing, that can kill you. There was a guy that died earlier this year trying to make an Instagram video, and he broke his neck squatting. He got stuck under a bar. My mentor has squatted, I think, 1,187 or 97 pounds, like some crazy number. He's a massive guy. But the story behind this was the guy before him went to squat it, got out of position, dumped the bar. It skinned the back of his head and took all the hair off the back of his head and cut the fingers off of the spotters because the weight was so much. So there's a consequence. But then my mentors told, okay, we're going to clean the platform up, and now you have to get out here and do this. So he's about to go into a fight or flight with that just happening. So when we get to maximal loads, we're in fight or flight. And when we're in fight or flight, we can't think anymore. So kind of like what you guys were talking about, the only way we can make sure the correct action is happening when those high stress environments are there is drilling. So we drill movement patterns when we lift. So when I have a squatter, say going back to that 500-pound squat, his empty barbell squat and his maximal squat look the same because I'm making sure that his hips are pushed back, his chest stays up, and his shins remain vertical by driving his knees out hard. And by doing that, I know instead of using his quads, his whole entire body is engaged in this movement. therefore creating a synergistic response in the body, and then for making for healthier, stronger lifting. Right. But if I try to explain all that right away, they're like, dude, you're a dork. Like, why do you like it's picking it up and putting it down? Like, why is it that serious, bro? And like, just like with explosives, hey, I just want to make things go boom until you blow all your fingers off. So it's one of those things where synergy is important, just like the basics are important, because if we can't communicate at a level where I don't even need to talk to my coaches, just like you guys, I can kind of look at them and we can correct it, or they know what I'm talking about. Awesome, because the real talk can happen later, because we're so synced up that they know what I'm thinking, they know what's going on, and they're going to go correct it, and we'll just talk about it later, because they know we focus on drilling over ego lifting and mechanics over everything else, because that's what builds resiliency. But it all comes back to this stuff that we're talking about here. How you do anything is how you do everything. No one in my weight room is going to impress me with the weights they lift. The way they're going to impress me is sound mechanics, sound proper mechanics, and making everything look good, because once everything's smooth, now we can add more weight. Now we can add intensity. Now we can add more dynamic effort, right? But we can't do those things until something has already been set, because if not, we're setting them up for catastrophic failure.
That is a beautiful point. I was actually just speaking to my jiu-jitsu class about this same topic, was the fact that I get guys, I'm sure, Sean, you've seen this as well on the BJJ mat. Somebody comes in like, I saw this great move on Instagram. Can we try it? Right? And it's the fanciness, the cool moves, the big lifts, it is for the ego. Like, it looks awesome. You want to be able to pull those things off, but they're just extensions of the basics. And if you don't have the foundations laid there, then you're just trying to flare out, as Sean likes to say. And interestingly enough, I was thinking about frapping charges, Matt, when you were talking, was, when you're doing reps, when you're sitting there frapping charges all day long and you're doing the same frap over and over and over and again, you just block after block after block. And I remember doing this in Afghanistan when it was really hot and we were all just sitting there sweating. We frapped, I think it was 3 blocks, like 120 charges. None of us were really paying attention to that in the moment. We weren't checking each other's fraps. We weren't making sure everything was tight, because we all knew how to do that over and over and over, just through the reps. And those little details, those little things apply to everything else you do. As you guys were saying, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I'm wondering if you guys can come up with a particular example where, let's say, success or a level of reps has enabled you to have success in a certain area that has then allowed you to benefit in another area. So it has had created kind of momentum in that you did one thing well, and oh man, that applies to this, and oh, that applies to that, and so on and so forth. What do you think? Sean, I'm going to hit you first. What do you got?
Sure. I'm gonna jump into that in a sec. I just want to continue on with something that Andrew said. It popped into my head as he was speaking, and I think it's a great example he relayed. So the guy who got the free haircut and lost some fingers, that sucks. I mean, listen, that's a bummer. It really is. I don't want to make too light of it, but dang, bro. Now, someone got the haircut. There go the fingers. On comes the next competitor. It's my guy. I'm the coach. Here's what's happening in that moment. I'm not pulling them off to the side and having this big, long conversation. I'm looking at him, I'm doing this. That's it. There'll be no words exchanged. It's just me saying, get your freaking head in the game. That's it. That's all. So why would I do that? Because my trust, my belief, what I've done leading up to that moment is have that person understand why they're there, irrespective of how many fingers are laying on the ground. It doesn't matter. If you're going to go do that thing, you should have been able to do that thing the day before when there were no fingers. You should be able to do that thing the following day. If you're in the right place for the right reason, if the mission is correct, if you are committed, if it all makes sense to you internally, then it doesn't matter what's going on externally. It just matters that you do the thing that you're there to do, that you wanted to do, that was chosen for you, or you chose it yourself. Either way, you've got to understand why you are in the moment. And I never have anyone in that moment as if it's an ambush. I've spent days or weeks or months or years helping them understand that that's where they belong. That's what they wanted. That's what we've talked about. That's why you're breathing. That's why you're on this planet. It's for now, this moment right now. And so if all of that groundwork hasn't been done by me as a coach leading up to that moment, so that irrespective of how many fingers are laying on the floor, frickin' hell could be standing by that bench. And that person should just be able to walk right past hell, elbow it out of the way, and frickin' get on with the job that they want to do, that they love doing, that they were born to do. That's my job, to create that moment with them. And it shouldn't be a thing that I have to jump into a soliloquy and explain for 10 minutes to help them move through the moment. It should just be a glance, a telepathic moment where I look at them, acknowledge what they're about to do, give them the nod, and then frickin' let them do it. And so that is the subtle nuance of subtle communication that should have occurred days, weeks, months, and years leading up to that moment. So now that that's out of the way, a time that I've been able to use this kind of synergistic success to move into momentum for the rest of my life, Tier 1 set me up for it. Tier 1 Special Operations taught me what humans can do. I didn't know what humans could do. I didn't know what I could do. I thought I'd limited myself. But then I got to hang out with like super freaks and realize that there's people in the world who can do things that I just can't even understand. And I want some of that. And then I started pursuing that. And that taught me that the only limitations we put on ourselves are dumb. We can freaking do anything we want. And I never used to think that. I didn't. When I was a scrawny, underperforming kid before I joined the Army, I just wasn't taught that you can do anything. Well, the Army taught me that. And so once I was formally educated in I can kick ass in anything, as long as it's important enough and I pour myself into it enough, I'll frickin' make it happen, man. And so once you know that you can make anything happen through will, it opens up the world to, it's almost the world is your oyster. Now, I'm not saying life is going to be easy, because it ain't. It's going to be hellacious if you're pursuing the impossible. But the impossible is possible if you put your heart into it. And so Tier 1 taught me what's possible. Once I knew it, I've never forgotten it. It's maybe the best gift I've ever gotten.
I love the fact that you said you were taught that, because I was told that as a kid. And I think there's a very big difference between being told that you can do anything and being shown that you can do anything. And that's a very big point to that. Matt, you got any thoughts on this one?
Well, I sure learned a lot from failure. And I failed a lot. And I was trying to think about what things have I done that led me to success. I guess it's just trying again. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And I look at a lot of stuff I've done. It's kind of crappy. I'd like to sit here and tell you that I'm a hard charger and win every time I step out. But to be honest, my first explosive magazine that I had to build to meet the specs to get my first license, I gave it a name called Good Enough, because it's good enough to pass the test, and I got my license. But there ain't nothing straight about that thing, and it's a little bit janky, but it works and it meets the spec. And I moved on with that. And you know, I'm learning as I go. I mean, hell, I'm learning right now as I'm talking to you. I don't even know what I'm gonna say next, because it was an experience of building my business where I took two people's advice and I ran with it. And one old boy, he owned a Gold Coast tattoo in California, and he was doing a UXO job with me on Vieques Island. And we had to stand down because some baby sea turtles were hatching. And so we, just me and him, and we're taking these little baby sea turtles and putting them in the water. And I asked him, I said, you're out here just because you want to be. I said, you don't have to. You own Gold Coast Tattoo. I said, what advice do you have for a guy that's starting a company? And he said, well, the bit of advice I'd give you would be you make your mind up that that's what you're going to do, and that's what you're going to do. And there ain't no alternative. And you don't give thought to what if or plan B or anything else. And in effect, it goes to the old saying of burn the boats. There's no way home. This is where we're going. All right. So I filed that away. And then I have a mentor in my life. He's a bit of a crazy dude, but he used to live in a KOA bathroom at night. He was actually married to my cousin, and he was homeless. And today, he already sold his multi-million-dollar business, sucking poop out of porta cans. He was the first guy I worked for. I had to be upside down in a septic tank. He'd be holding me by my feet while I'd clean the bottom of that thing. And I said, John, this looks awful, and he started laughing. He lost his strength and drug me upside of that tank, ripped my arm open in a septic pit. So I'm immune to anything. I've already had it all in my blood. But I asked him one day, I said, John, what's one piece of advice you'd give me? Something that really counts, that I can take to the bank. And he said, don't be afraid. He said, you're going to be surrounded by people that are not going where you're going, and they're afraid. He said, and you're going to look on a new horizon. In effect, he said that you're going to look on a new horizon where you've never been and nobody around you's been there before. And it's natural to be afraid, but don't be, and go anyway. So I applied those two things. And how you do anything is how you do everything. Well, I guess when I really believe it's worth it, that's just all there is. That's the way it's going to be. And then I'm not afraid, and I go. And I usually make a first step out is writing a big old cow pie, big slop mess, look like an idiot. And I've heard it said before that before you become the master, you have to be the clown. And I wear a lot of clown paint all the time. But I know, and I always tell myself that on the other side of that coin is the master. And it takes, you might be the doofus out there doing something, but you don't, you get something else with that. If you're going to pay that price, you get something for it. That's how commerce works. You pay and you get. Well, if you're going to pay to be the idiot in the beginning, it's going to be acknowledged that you're brave enough to do it. And then you become the master in time. So remember and tell yourself that in discouraging times. So how you do anything is how you do everything. Well, set my mind to it. Go at it. Don't be afraid. And when you screw up, get up and go again.
The interesting thought that kicked in my head while you're talking there, Matt, was the fact that the rodeo clowns are usually the oldest bull riders. They're usually the guys that have been there the longest. They've been doing the job for a really long time. They know the animals. They can read the stuff. So the clowns are usually the masters in the arena. This is a beautiful point. Andrew, what are you thinking?
Geez, my whole life has kind of been this weird synergistic pile, but kind of like Sean, I didn't really have, I knew I had a lot of potential and talent as a kid, but I just didn't have anywhere to direct it. And then the Coast Guard and then the teams that I was on gave me the opportunity to prove to myself what I had kind of felt inside, but didn't really know. So that's where I started to really learn or lay the foundations for the things that were going on for me, as far as like the communication, honor, character, being committed to a craft, being a professional. And then just through my story, I kind of lost that for a while. What makes me a good coach is I was a caseworker for a long time. I worked 8 years in human services and social work. And that, if my team taught me how to shoot, move, and communicate, that work taught me how to process raw trauma and emotion, and then how to be very constructive and reframe it. Now, as a coach, my whole job is communication, because I could be smart and articulate and all this other stuff, but if I can't break down what I do to bite-sized pieces for the people I'm working with to understand, I'm not very smart. And that was something I learned from a mentor of mine. I've been big on mentors in my life. I've had mentors in every stage that I've been in, whether it was a team leader or a head social worker, or even now a world-class strength coach that I fall under his mentorship and tutelage. But my social worker mentor died suddenly in 2020. And that was kind of like the catalyst that pushed me, because she had kind of gave me the time to see, like, you have all these things, and I was seeing success through effective communication. But then again, I had the realities of just the world that we live in. Because like Sean said, it's never going to be easy. And if you're expecting an easy road, just be prepared to fail, because life is nothing but adversity and failure and just learning from that. And when she died, that took all the momentum out of me. But it was like, she always said to me, like, hey, you need to be coaching. Like, this is what you do. You're good at this, but this is really your thing. And then, kind of like Matt said, having the bravery to step out, start again, because I had built myself into a healthy career. And then to start again and be like, you know what, I'm going to go do this thing and I'm going to burn the boats. And there is no other option. So there was some catalysts that happened in my life, but it also took me acting on those things and being willing to get uncomfortable, being brave enough to not be afraid to start over, fail again, not look at monetary value, look at what was filling my heart and my spirit, and then canceling the noise of the world, and then finding those other people to create synergy once again in my life to now build towards that mission success. So I'm a big communicator because my whole world is communication, whether it was shoot, move, communicate and empathize through feelings to process trauma, or now communicate to the point that I can educate, create adaptation, and then get an individual to rest and recover so we can continue to do the same thing and work our progress and process over time. But I always tell these guys what makes me, like, I have coaches that are way smarter than me. I just learned through social work how to listen and then how to articulate what I'm trying to get across. But I could just be a strength coach and just do the X's and O's and sets and reps and put that bag of everything I learned in those 8 years away, or I can continue to apply, use what's useful and carry it on, just like I've done with the teams. There's things from that time in my life that are not useful to me anymore, but there's a lot of stuff that is. So if I use what's useful and get rid of what's not, I continue to make room for the things that need to happen so I can progress as an individual, a man, a professional, a teammate, a leader, all of these other things in my life. Because on the other side of that, if we're holding on to too much, we never create room to take these new things, right? Like if I held on to too much of what I had, I never would have met you guys. We'd never have these conversations. We'd never have this synergy that we have now. So not to like ramble and rant about it, but I'm big on communication. And I know even Sean is there and you guys all are, because before we can learn how to communicate with the subtleties, we need to know how to communicate, period. And if we don't know how to do that, we're in trouble.
100%. Could not agree more with that one. Interestingly enough, when one of the things that drew me towards podcasting and teaching and so on and so forth is the fact that I had a very base desire to be heard. And I, growing up with my family and stuff, I wasn't heard very often. So I had this desire, and Sean and I have talked about this before on the show, is that once I let go of that desire to be heard, people started listening. Right? I didn't have to force my opinion on people. I didn't have to create positions where I had to tell them about stuff so that they knew exactly what I was trying to think. It doesn't really matter in that respect. And the more that I kind of step off from that desire to be in front, more people listen to what I have to say when I say it. So I think it's a really interesting dichotomy, and I'm loving where this is going. Sean, I want to touch you here on this for a second, because we had a conversation at one point about burn the ships, and you said that you were a bit wonky on that label. So let's hear your thoughts on that.
So I haven't changed my mind on it either. If I recall correctly, my general stance when this subject came up, and it's come up several podcasts, but my position is this: I'm not into burning the boats. What I am into is taking the boats, moving them into that secret little cove that's nice and safe, putting a party on it that observes the boats to secure them, and then me and the main body are going to go in and kick that ass. And if we need those boats, well, we've always got them. But I'm not treating the boat as my get out of jail free card, because I'm going to punch in and I'm going to do my thing. But if desperate times call for desperate measures, then I've always got the boats in my back pocket. But I've never lived my life like I need the boats. The boats are there for my guys. They're not there for me. And so I'm not into burning the boats. I'm into securing the boats, but not relying on the boats, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I wanted to touch on that specifically because I think it's an important piece in that I think when we had the conversation, you referred to it as why waste an asset? right? It's there. And if you need it to get perhaps say flank a target, go beyond it, and then come back from a different angle, then it's still useful to have. But I do like the analogy of not going home, and I think that's the
Yeah, we're talking mindset, not actual real world assets.
yes.
Since I've got the mic for a sec, I just want to say something to Matt. We've done a lot of podcasts here on the Collective and the Gold Mine over the last year and nearly 2 years now, I guess. And it's not that common that a guest will tell a story that makes me think, oh yeah, that's right. That's the most powerful story out there, is the small, unassuming stories. On a beach with a dude moving turtles back into the ocean. And in that moment, the non-contrived moment between two dudes, some wisdom is swapped that changes a guy's life. It's these small moments, man. It's the small stories. What I find grabs the headlines is the dude who climbs Everest 3 times without oxygen in one day. And that's great. Everyone's got to crack it out of the park. We all need people in our lives that we look at and think, what in the actual hell just happened? We all need that. But the more commonplace thing that we all need, I believe, is the small, uncontrived moments, just as Matt said. The ones that make way more impact than the actual Everest climbs, but only if someone thinks about them for years. I've forgotten all of the Everest climbers over the years. I mean, name 10. But I can name 10 dudes who've impacted me over my life on small, unassuming, quiet, in the shadow moments that no one ever gets to see or hear. In fact, a lot of those moments required subtle communication, almost telepathically, that no words are exchanged. I can think of those moments like now, bam, 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 but I can't name an Everest climber. Society as a whole focuses on the wrong things, in my opinion, when it comes to this specific subject of the synergies that really impact your entire life. So, Matt, thanks for the cool story.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
This makes me think of bandwidth, right? In terms of, when we were talking about nutrition, Sean, last week, you had said high-level athletes have a very clean signal because they have certain habits laid into so that when you're getting information back from them, it's a very clean, oh, your calories are low today. Okay, easy to manage, that kind of stuff. But do you think that there are ways to help others tune into that vibe a little bit better? And I think, to your point, Sean, at least in my mind, sorry, I'm jumping back to this, is that those moments in time are clean signal moments, right? There is only one thing coming in. You're getting that one wavelength. Whereas, that dude that climbs Everest 3 times in a day, that's a massive amount of bandwidth that's going to hit you, but it's a dirty signal. There's just so much going on versus a single solitary lone moment where you can go with a clear signal. So I'm wondering, what do you think helps people or yourself tune into those vibes throughout their lives? Is there certain mindsets, traits, something that you guys have done over your lives that allowed you to fall into that synergistic moment a little bit easier than others? Matt, I'm going to hit you first. What do you think?
Authenticity. Yeah. So when you're saying what you know and what you believe, you genuinely believe, people respond to that. I remember once I had talked about how great Texas was while I was in Puerto Rico, and one of the Puerto Rican leader guys, he goes, "I'm going to come see that place." And so I brought him out here, and we blew some cars up, and we were shooting some guns, and somebody came up and was talking about something that I was cooking up. And I said, "Well, gee, I didn't know I was that convincing." And that guy looked at me, he said, "I'm here." And he was there because when I spoke about Texas and when I talked about the things that we do and the spirit of it, it was convincing and compelling because I believe it. I mean, I really believe it. I don't have to convince myself of it. And when we set out on goals that are worthy and we know it and we believe it, I think you stir things up in the heart of people and you get them to move. And this can be for the light or the dark. I think it's just a force, like an explosive. It can be used for evil and it can be used for good. And one of the characters that I often think about is Adolf Hitler. And Adolf Hitler was on a park bench, a broken, poor, failed artist. And many years later, this guy brought the world to war. He had to believe what he was saying, which is spewing a bunch of hate and evil. And he drew that out of people, but he did it because it was authentic. And I don't know where I saw this, but somebody was talking about that the human body puts out these energy fields that can be detected. And I think it was authenticity was the most powerful, the one that could be felt the furthest. And maybe that's pseudoscience. I don't know. But I do know that when you speak with passion, it's a recipe for cooking up emotion and getting people to be inspired.
It's a beautiful point. We were actually talking about the mountains beforehand. We were hitting this exact same point. I think that's beautiful. Andrew, what are you thinking?
Let me unmute myself real quick. So I'm going to kind of piggyback off of that and go with authenticity. I had a mentor, again, tell me you are a one-of-one person. And I say that because everyone else is already taken. And then in the world of coaching, right, there's already a ton of strong people and people doing this and people doing that. So one of the things I try to use that makes me different is I reframe the way I view strength. Because strength, if we think about the term strength, is the ability and the willingness to overcome adversity. So strength can be used in terms of lifting something, or strength could be in terms of, I want to react this way, but I'm going to practice temperance and reservation and now overcome this other form of resistance that I have in my life. So I try to go into rooms adding value, finding where I can add strength. Sometimes that strength is fixing someone's technique. Sometimes that strength is motivating a group of individuals. Sometimes that strength is just sitting there and listening to someone because I know deep down they just need to get something off. And even though I don't have the time, I may be the only person that they have to listen to for 5 or 10 minutes, whatever it is. So I try to view my strength or strength in terms of that, and then also look at, what do I want to be with my life? Like what is it that I want to be? And then what is it that's stopping me from getting there? Because at the end of the day, if I can't control all of these other things, I can control my thoughts and my actions. So at the end of the day, I always try to bring it back on me. And being a servant leader, it's always about what I can do. But if I'm doing that, I'm teaching people to do the same thing. So I just reframe strength to try to create buy-in, because it's a relative term. I've squatted 600 pounds in my life, and that sounds strong to some people. But when you go back to that 1,100-pound squatter, that's not very strong. So it's a relative term. It really doesn't matter. It's the ability to and willingness to engage and overcome some form of adversity. And it doesn't always have to be fighting gravity. Sometimes that strength through adversity is overcoming our thoughts, minds, and actions. So I try to spin what I use here, because ultimately the weight room is just a tool to get at that warrior spirit, that warrior mentality, and ultimately the willingness to continue to get up again and again and again, because I am not overly talented. I'm just stubbornly positive, and I just choose to continue to get up, dust myself off, learn and learn and learn until I learn it the right way. And then I try to find people who know more than me and continue to learn. So I just try to foster that type of environment. I don't like being the smartest person in the room, because then I'm in the wrong room, and I keep a white belt mentality where I can learn from everyone, right? The goal of a white belt is to just learn, to gain a knowledge base. The goal of a black belt is to instruct and also understand you don't know everything. This is just the beginning. So I try to keep a white belt mentality with everyone that I'm around, but I also give myself the respect of my craft, that I am a black belt in my craft. But that doesn't make me that I'm the end all be all of everything. There's a lot of other black belts out there, and there's a lot of people to learn from. And if I'm a good coach, I'm learning from everyone, regardless of that belt.
I really like this. And I was watching a clip earlier from a friend of the show, Fran Richopi. He's got the Jedberg podcast. Great dude. One of the clips that he put out, he was talking about, when you get to a team room, or when you get to drafted into a professional league or anything like that. That's not the end all be all. Like, haha, I've made it, and then you can stop. That's just getting a seat at the table. And I think to your point, when you get a black belt in jiu-jitsu, every black belt I've ever known in jiu-jitsu has told me the same thing. They got their black belt, they started rolling with other black belts that are much higher than them, and they were like, I know nothing. I guess I got to start all over again. Okay, how do we do this? And then they go back to the basics and they start to really refine what it is they're doing through repetition. Sean, you got any thoughts on any of this?
I do. So I'm going to use the term Jedi trickery as my opening statement to make people sit up and pay attention to this next piece. So you can control a person's mind by how you stand, the rate of your breathing, the tilt of your head, whether you side-eye them, straight-eye them, up-eye them, all the various things that you can do with your posture, structure, your energy. You can, so to Matt's point, it's called neural synchronicity or neural synchronization. It is being measured through fMRIs. It's the science is there to demonstrate that humans can synchronize on a neural level. But it doesn't just, it's not like we're all wandering through the world synchronizing with each other the moment that you get 11.25 feet within a person's proximity. There's no off gap, there's no magical distance, it's guaranteed to happen because of ... Neural synchronicity can occur, and it can occur almost autonomously, but you've got to be aware of it to make it non-autonomous. And so to use neural synchronicity, you've got to observe it happening in the world. You've got to observe it in your interactions. You've got to try to understand what is occurring, and then you've got to try to patternize that. Then you've got to try to repeat that in the future until it becomes a tool, until it becomes Jedi trickery. Now, the Jedi trickery of it doesn't mean that you're a goof. It means that it's just another tool that you can use when you're interacting with someone. And it doesn't mean that you're going to do it well in every instance, because that is learning, that is failing. You've got to start somewhere, blow it a whole bunch of times until you become kind of okay at it, and then build off of that. But because you haven't done it up till now, or because maybe this is the first time that anyone is hearing about neural synchronicity, it doesn't mean that you're behind the power curve, or, well, why start now? I'm 37. There's no way I'm going to start playing with neural synchronicity. There's no time left. Well, like every tool, you'll get as good at it as you want to get at it by simply doing it and trying to get better at it. So there are ways that you can tune into someone's vibe easier rather than not. And it takes practice, observed practice, like intentional practice. The intentional meditation, intentional neural synchronization, intentionally brushing your teeth, intentionally lifting a deadlift bar. All of these things, if you're going to do it well, you have to know why you're doing it. Otherwise, you're not going to step over the fingers. You've got to know that you're going to give it your all. You've got to understand that the reason you're giving it your all is because you're going to fail. You're going to do it better the next time. And then you're going to keep on trying. You're never going to quit trying to understand neural synchronicity. You're never going to quit trying to be a better at vacuuming. Life, to me, is a game. It's a challenging game, but it's a game. And it's a game that you get to play well or not. And the only one who's hobbling you from being successful in this game is you. If you believe that you're not playing a game, you're already hobbled. If you believe that you can't win, you're hobbled. If you believe that you're going to give it 70%, you're hobbled. All of these mindset decisions, these branching points of how to do better in life, it's all on us. It's all on the individual and what they want in life. So to vibe more easily with someone else, freaking start vibing more with yourself.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful point. And I have another question here, and I know we're getting tight on time here, but I want to see if you guys have any other thoughts on that specifically. Andrew, you got any thoughts on that?
No, the only thing that pops to my head would be a quote from the late, great Louis Simmons. If you run with the lame, you develop a limp.
That's a good one. I like that line. Matt, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think the poem is called "The Man Who Can," and I don't remember everything about it, but in the end, it says, you know, that the prize doesn't always go to he who's faster or smarter, but sooner or later, it goes to the man who thinks he can. I like that.
Love that. We had
Dang, I've never heard that one, boys. That sucks. That's all right. I dig it.
we had a guy on a little while ago, Chris Howder, and one of his lines is, "It's not about who's good, it's about who's left." And I think that does, it's a piece of it too, right? Is if you stick long enough, if you stick in long enough in whatever it is you're doing, you're going to be one of the few that are still doing it long down the road. So I think that is a beautiful point. Now, I have one last question for you guys, and then I think we'll have to do some final thoughts, because this has been a fantastic conversation. I love it. I've been so engrossed. There's been a whole bunch of comments on the Instagram and the thing that I haven't even hit those. So I really do appreciate this. Now, here is the question that I want to ask you guys. What advice would you give to someone who's struggling right now to create synergy between their work and their personal life? And I mean, or their personal life and their hobbies, or their work and their hobby, whatever. But if they're struggling to create synergy, what advice would you give to that person? Matt, you're on top. I'm going to hit you first. What do you think?
Oh, well, you ever heard the old saying, work-life balance? I've heard someone say that rich people don't take vacation. And I thought about it, and I was like, well, I don't take vacation, and I don't think I'm rich, you know, but I don't have a work-life balance because I'm only one thing. I mean, that's not to say I can't sit and drink a coffee with you and talk about the weather a little bit, but I'm going somewhere. Like, every day I get up, I don't have to make myself go to work. I have a guy right now shadowing me for about 2 weeks. He just wants to see what I do. And we wake up, we work out. Then we go and we meet with the employees. We have coffee. We tell some jokes. We talk about what our goals are for the day. And then the phone starts ringing, and it changes everything every time. Or an email comes in. It's like, crap, now we got to go deal with that. And I told him, I said, that's an adventure. It's all about the way you think about it. And the only way you can get there is if you're doing something you were designed to do, something you were built to do. And the only way you can figure out what that is, I really believe, is if you spend some time being quiet, asking yourself and diving within. I really believe all the answers you're looking for, they're already in you. They're not out there. They're in you, and you got to spend the quiet time to do it. So if you're trying to find that synergy and life is a little bit chaotic, go somewhere quiet and get to know yourself, and then become that person. And everything else is going to fall in place. All the crap that doesn't serve you is going to fall away, and all the great things coming to you are going to present themselves. And if you're brave, you're going to jump on it and roll with it and see what the next chapter brings.
Bam. All right, everybody, let's shut down the show again. That's a perfect answer. Andrew, what advice would you give someone?
I'm going to play off that a little bit, because I mean, that right there, like you said, we could wrap it up there. But synergy is not created in a silo. So going back to that work-life balance thing, I was never a big believer in work-life balance. I'm a believer in life balance. Because just like Matt had said, like, I don't really have days that I don't want to get up and go to work. I love what I do. It doesn't mean that every day I'm super optimistic and positive about it, but I have a purpose. So I have a purpose, and part of that purpose is to stay on mission with what I'm trying to do, but also bring as many people that are like-minded into that as I can. And one thing I've just realized is you can't compartmentalize, like, oh, this is my work goal, this is my life goal, this is my family goal, this is this goal, this is that, because at the end of the day, you only got one life. So how do we make it all work together? How do we synergize this thing? The first thing you got to do is reframe and break all of those silos out of there. It doesn't mean it's going to be easy. Like there's plenty of days I get home from work and then I get home, I kiss my wife and I do 2 to 3 more hours of work, right? That's just the nature of the beast. But at the end of the day, this is the life I want to live because I'm living out my passions and the things that I love, and everything worth doing is hard and requires sacrifice. So I can't say I want these things and then not be willing to make the necessary changes to go get them, because then that's just lip service. And we live in a world of lip service now. And I think it's safe to say the four of us, like, we're not perfect, but we're men of action. So we're not afraid to go out there and figure it out and try to figure it out, or reach out to someone who might know it better than us and help us figure it out. And that's literally us just not siloing our lives. Even within this conversation, we've talked about so many different things, but it really ties in that point of synergy. We couldn't do that if it's like, well, I'm just going to talk about this and I'm just going to talk about that, and you just focus on this part, and then we'll talk about synergy, guys. Right? Like, it wouldn't kind of drive the purpose of this conversation the way that we have been. So that's been kind of cool for me within these last couple of hours, because this conversation has been the practical application of what a topic is.
Bam. Again, awesome. Sean, what do you think? You're still muted. There you go.
I'm going to try to do it a little bit of a different way because there's not much I can add to the two fellas there. So I'm going to go back to the poem, which it sucks that I wasn't aware of it. But I quickly hit the Googles, and I'm not going to read the entire poem, but here's the relevant point. The name of the poem is called Thinking. It's a poem written by Walter D. Wintle, a poet who lived in the late 19th and early 20th century. Little to nothing is known about any details of his life. Thinking is also known as the man who thinks he can. In the 20th century, different versions of the poem have been published, and etc. Now, here's the beautiful part to me. I didn't know about it, and the world doesn't know much about the poet. But the poet put out something that was picked up by some brojimos, the guest panels. And so the guest panel just dropped it into the show when I became aware of it. Now it's part of my life. Now I know about the poem, but more importantly to me, the way I think is at a deeper level, it's not about the poem. It's about a dude that the world knows nothing about who was brave enough to capture words on paper, maybe give it to his neighbors. Somehow, synergistically, that got put out. And now here we are talking about it in this podcast. To me, that's what synergy is. A big system synergy. But these kind of great outcomes, I call it a great outcome for Sean anyway, now that I have this new knowledge. The great outcome only comes about if your synergistic circle, or who you surround yourself with, or who you engage with, or how many fingers you've got in how many pies, that's the synergy. Synergy doesn't fall out of the rain clouds. It won't drop out of the tree and hit you on the head like an apple. Synergy is something that you might be lucky enough to find on a beach when you're putting turtles back in the ocean. But usually these moments are created. And I'm sure that Matt somehow created that moment if he thinks about it. And so all of the great synergistic blips on the radar or non-blips on the radar are only available to us if we seek the right synergistic circles.
One of the things that I love about the collective especially is the amount of people that I get to talk to. And people have asked me a bunch of times, like, oh, wow, you know what, you really like podcasting? I'm like, yeah, I do. But what I really love about it is the fact that I get to hang out with awesome people. And just being in that circle has created so much more for me than running a podcast would. Because I could interview people all day, but to be surrounded by a group of people that are just awesome people makes me that much more awesome. And I cannot thank you guys enough for this conversation. It has been really, really great. I don't know how we're going to top it next time. Maybe we should call the show. We'll ever have to come back to it again. But let's get some final thoughts. Anything at all still bubbling in the back of your brain, or that you just haven't quite touched on yet in synergy? Andrew, what do you think?
No, I think we kind of hit on everything there. I think the only thing I would encourage people to do is you got to put it into practice every single day. You got to get your reps in. That's the only way that this is going to work. So, and that reps have nothing to do with how you feel. Let's get that right out of the way. Repetition has nothing to do with how you feel. Forget about how you feel. You do it when you don't feel like it. You do it when you do feel like it. You do it when you're tired, when you're not tired, when you're hungry. It doesn't matter, right? That's how things become synergistic, is when we remove that emotion. So if that's something that you struggle with, figure that part out, because your emotions cannot dictate your outcomes, or you'll never get where you're trying to go.
Bam, 100%. Matt, final thoughts?
Well, yeah, I would say if synergy is a goal worthwhile and a positive thing that makes the world a better place and your life a better place, and being authentic is an ingredient of being synergetic with those around you, then focus on being authentic. And if you're a critic and you're listening to something like this and you say, yeah, but you don't understand my situation. Yeah, but if you're hearing that thought in your head right now, that's your yellow brick road. That's where you start. You have to stop that and know that it is a fact. One day, hopefully you have enough people to love you to pay for a headstone, but there's going to be a headstone that has your name and a date, a dash, and another date, and nobody cares what's that dash about. So that is up to you. And the road to your successes start with that, yeah, but, and throwing that crap out the window.
Love it. Sean, any final thoughts?
Final thoughts are this: synergy, though we didn't define it at the very start of the show through the etymology of the word, or in 1770, a French philosopher named it as such because of the following. We didn't do that because synergy can mean so many freaking different things. The synergy of yourself, the external world and the internal world. Get a freaking balance. Get some synergy going. Realize that it's not you versus you. Sometimes it is. Sometimes it's you and you. So, synergy with yourself, synergy with your neighbor, synergy with your town, synergy with your country, synergy with the world, synergy with the enemy, synergy with your friends. Everything is an opportunity to work with something else. The simple fact of Sean's external world and internal world are two things that sometimes don't want to work together. It's my job to make them work together, to create synergy. Just like this show, it's our job, four of us, it's our job to synergistically put out some wisdom. And I think we did. We put out more wisdom as a group than if we would have all independently scribbledy-doo down our thoughts and then handed them into the teacher at the front of the class to see if we get a passing grade. I think if we would have all independently put our report cards into the teacher, maybe we're B's or B pluses. But as a team working on the subject, I'll give it an A. Definitely more than a B plus for sure. And so right people, right time, saying the right things synergistically will always magnify the outcome of just an individual. So synergistically think about who you need to work with, yourself and others.
I I don't have much to add except for this one little piece that I've been thinking about kind of all day, is that in my mind, synergy is the mixture of consistent, like aggressive chasing of something. You want to do something, and submission to the process. So you have to chase and submit at the same time. And I at least in my mind, that's where synergy really comes from. So thank you guys. This has been an absolutely outstanding conversation. And I'm going to be thinking about this one for quite a while. So I really appreciate it. And as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see y'all next week. Chimo.